got through this. Easy for listening. I was able to do it. Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear. You're a disgrace, you are. Not me. That's my fear. You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to Shadowboxing. Today my guest is Chris Marr. Chris, you are running for the seat of Kimberley as the Green candidate.
Yes, indeed I am. Absolutely. The big seat. Lots of issues in the upcoming election.
What are the problems the Kimberley or the Broome voters facing in their daily life?
Housing is a huge issue across the Kimberley. Mr Grills has the Royalties for Regions program, which is meant to be making sustainable communities that are great places to live.
And they got lots of money for that.
Lots of money.
Kitty. Yes.
$80 million was spent on supporting mining companies. $1 million of the $80 million yes. under Royalties for Region was spent on uranium exploration. Now, not by any stretch of the imagination can uranium exploration make a sustainable community that's a great place to live, which is the goal of Royalties for Regions. So we would reprioritise that money away from supporting mining companies and to meeting the real needs of people in the Kimberley, one of which is housing. Now, there are a number of issues facing Aboriginal people in the Kimberley. We have a range of communities throughout the Kimberley. But what we're seeing now is that surreptitiously the government is withdrawing funding from some of those smaller communities.
How can they do that when they got lots of money in hand?
Well,
why? What do you think?
Well, I think the government believes that it's easier to service people if they congregate them somewhere. But we know historically that's not a good thing because that leads to a whole range of social issues. People are far better living on their own country, engaged in the things they want to engage in, than being forcibly congregated somewhere. So there's an idea of hub communities now where people are being moved from smaller communities to bigger communities, and we think that people should be able to stay on their own country, even in those smaller communities, and that we should just be creative about finding ways to find people good, meaningful employment. We know that tourism has a remarkable potential and potential for the Kimberley. The New York Times listed the Kimberley as one of the places to visit. It was the only location in Australia.
Investors?
For tourists.
For tourists?
For tourists.
That's
it
not
was
for
suggesting,
the miners,
no. It was suggesting to tourists they must go and see the Kimberley. It was one of the must-see places in the world. It was the only destination in Australia to make the New York Times list. But the New York Times had a catch. They said, yes, you better get there quick because of the oncoming industrialisation. So that tells us that even the New York Times
can realise the problem.
Can realise if we have industrialisation, we won't attract the same level of tourists that we can by promoting the Kimberley.
Let's go into the big issue of yours in the Kimberley. It's a very unusual thing. You believe, and this is what people are saying all around WA, one topic can determine a seat in the Kimberley. Is that true?
I think it is true. I think we'll see that this one issue will determine the outcome of this election.
So what is the issue which has got that much of weight?
Well, this one issue, of course, is this proposed gas processing hub at James Price Point, just north of Broome. And in the Browse Land Act agreement, there are two parts. One part covers the proposed gas processing hub, and that states that at the end of the 30 years, that Woodside will dismantle that hub and return that country to as they found it, if indeed that's possible. The other part covers the port, and there is no such requirement for the deepwater port to be taken away. So that would tell us that there's another goal in this proposal, which isn't about gas processing, but it's about having a deep water port in the Kimberley for the future extraction of other mineral resources across the Kimberley. And currently about 80% of the Kimberley is under mining tenement. We know there's coal all through the Fitzroy Valley, and with some...
That's the latest discovery, is it?
That's a recent discovery.
Yes.
And there's some intentions to have that, to start mining that coal. And there's a number of problems with that. One being, of course, I'm not sure the world wants coal. I think the world is looking for renewable energy sources, not coal. And I don't think we should be in a rush to sell a polluting commodity such as coal. And there's, of course, the environmental potential for those open-cut coal mines to flood into the Fitzroy River. And that is a monsoonal flood valley, the Fitzroy, and I don't believe any safeguard could prevent some of those huge floods we have in the Kimberley impacting on those coal mines.
So everyone knows in Australia and in Western Australia, mining industry is the strongest industry in this country. They determine what government do, how government do things traditionally in the past 150 years. I don't think it's an exception now can be made. So how do you think, or how the Greens think that you can win against big money and people who got decision-making powers stronger than Colin Barnett or Julie Gillard in this country?
Well, this is a very important part of Australia, and it's not the same as anywhere else. This is do or die for the Kimberley. If this project goes ahead, the impacts will be felt right across the Kimberley, right across the Kimberley. This is not just an issue for people in Broome. There will be impacts that will unfold from this that will impact on the rest of the Kimberley.
For the futures. For
the future. I mean, we already know that if you just look at Broome, there is some independent research that tells us that this project will cost every taxpayer in WA, with the government spending far more money to get this project up than it could ever get back. The Australia Institute's research showed that it would drive inflation in our region, right across our region, impact on housing prices, impact on small business, and provide jobs not for local people, but for people outside the region. So we know the economics don't stack up in this particular proposal.
So, but the government still want to go for it.
But the government wants to go for it, and what the Greens believe is that we could do it in a way that didn't impact on that country just north of Broome. We could do it in a way that didn't impact on the tourism potential of the Kimberley, and we could do it in a way that was far more sustainable than the way that the Barnett-Grylls government is proposing to do it.
Explain to us how the gas project can still exist in a different form.
Well, we know there are a number of viable options for extracting that gas. And one is, of course, Shell's floating technology now, where they could process the gas on floating platforms.
That's what Shell want to do, but...
That's what Shell want to do.
It's not what the Barnett government
wants to do. No, that's right. But the other alternative, of course, is to pipe that gas down to facilities in the Pilbara, which exist, and within 10 years, some of those facilities will be running out of gas to process.
So they need some munition.
And this could be an alternative for them. So those two options, all the financial analysts are telling us, are
better options than the one.
More economic options than building a greenfield site north of Broome.
What the Barnett government want to do is something different from the gas processing. They got some other motivation to carry through an action which no one really want, but they do want to have it. So what's that and why?
Well, we believe it's,
yes.
It's the future expansion of industrialisation through the Kimberley. So we believe that there's a potential for that coal to be exported out of the valley through a deep water port at James Price Point. That's one potential scenario.
The government gas processing plan is need a port.
It needs a port.
It needs a deep sea port.
Yeah.
which does not exist as a infrastructure.
Yes.
So the government would like to invest the taxpayers' money in an infrastructure, which is deep sea infrastructure in the Kimberleys.
Yes. And while the gas hub needs support, I think more importantly, the Premier needs support to carry out his vision
Of
industrialisation of the Kimberley.
what is based on? What this vision is based on?
Well, we have heard in the past Premier Barnett saying that the Pilbara has driven the West Australian economy for the past 50 years, and he believes that the Kimberley should drive the economy for the next 50 years.
Yes.
So we're basing it on some things that the Premier has said. One past CEO of Woodside has said that he thought Broome could be the next Dubai.
Oh,
So we've had that scenario trotted out. Of course, nobody in Broome has ever been consulted about whether they want their community to be turned into a Dubai. Part of the tools the government has been using to bring about its vision is a stripping away of democracy. The Development Assessment Panel, which makes some approvals which ordinarily would have been made by local government, elected by local people, are now being made by a Development Assessment Panel, which consists of people being appointed
by the
that-
government.
By the government.
The
to-
majority of the people appointed by the government. So this assessment panel already assessed the situation in Broome,
Yes.
and they said, yeah, that's all good, regardless what the people say. Let's start digging. Or what's happened?
that wasn't quite the way it came.
Tell us, how does it happen?
Well, Woodside started digging
Without having any approval.
without having any approval. And many people in Broome knew this and were blockading the road to stop
And they called
Woodside
the
digging,
police.
and they were arrested. So we have about
Oh.
40 people in Broome who were arrested
Protesting against the digging, which does
protesting
not have
against
the license to
an
dig.
unlawful destruction of country. And they were arrested for this for blockading unlawful clearing.
That should go into the New York Times.
That should go into the New York Times. And then, of course, when Woodside applied to the Development Assessment Panel for retrospective approval, so asking for approval for what it has already done unlawfully,
They got it.
They got
I suppose.
it because
Are they?
They did get it because that panel isn't about local government. It's a government-appointed panel.
So that's tell you one thing: money talks, bullshit walks,
Indeed,
and democracy disappears.
absolutely.
Do you think you need to live in the Kimberley, to understand that how things can be done in the Kimberley, or you can just walk there and do?
No, you need to live in the Kimberley to understand the Kimberley and understand Kimberley people. It's a very unique part of Australia, a very unique part of the world, and that's what gives us our wealth. It's not what you find underground, it's what you find above the ground. That is most important and most valuable in the Kimberley.
You're talking about communities and people.
Communities and people and just natural wealth in the environment.
Chris, thank you very much being with us and have this discussion on your election aims. Good luck for the election, and we will see what's happening after the 9th of March election.
Thanks for your time, Tibor.
You're welcome. Please stay with us because we're coming back with more on shadowboxing.